podcast listeners, if you hear my voice right now, I need you to do something for me. I want you to take out your phone or on your computer, go to Apple Podcasts, search for Ask Your Oldhead Podcast. You'll see my logo, my little picture, my little image there. Find the show. Please rate and write a review. It's a small thing, but it helps others find this work and find what I'm doing here. And it really, really matters, as small as that may seem. So if you could please do that before we get into the show, I would much appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Let's get into it. Peace. Peace. You are listening to Good Brothers. Let's go. Peace, Majestic.
Peace. What's happening, baby?
Man, you know, it's I mean, I don't know if it's totally apropos, but in a sense, you know, it was all good a week ago.
Man.
You know, to the degree that it was. You know what I'm saying? To the degree that it is, you know, a week later, you know, from our conversation from the week before, what was the week?
Yeah.
Here we are. And I thought we agreed that it would probably actually be poignant to stay in this space on at the moment and look at some things. So coming out of this week, you know, based on where we were this time last week, you know, what are some of the thoughts you're having about what's happening?
Man. Yeah, man. It's been quite a week. You know what I mean? History will reveal, and history, you know, will talk about the extent of change, but I would say what's been happening within a week has been a national and global shift, right? And really bringing things to bear. But you know, it's also it's a big challenge because you know, I know we'll get into it, but there's never change without collateral damage.
Yeah.
And sometimes you gotta be okay. You gotta see, are you okay with the collateral damage? And you know, some of the collateral damage of places in America that things happen, I'm not necessarily okay with, being born and raised in one of them, and looking at the impacts that it have beyond this space, right? But you know, you can't deny that it's been a lot of shifting and a lot of changing, a lot of language now. What that language means, where that language goes, you know, who's perpetually centered in that language, right? Who's perpetually identified as the leader of those conversations, I think will be one of the bigger challenges going forward.
That I mean, my prevailing like thought, you know what I'm saying, at the moment, and it stems to a conversation that ended up having with the kids maybe the night before, 2 nights ago, around protests and like what happens or what's supposed to happen. What does, in a sense, victory look like? You know, maybe that might be too strong a word, but that's not exactly what they asked. But it was sort of like, well, what's the next thing? Once, you know, how do we know something happened, right? And you know, one of the things we got to talking about was, you know, that protests and civil, you know, disobedience, if you want to go that route, if you want to call it that, being out in the street in the, especially in the context where people primarily want to exercise their right to be heard, to be seen, you know, with those elements of the disruptive factors that say you can't just ignore me, i.e. we're going to do a march down this, you know, street that normally would be filled with cars.
Right.
Right. And so you have, you know, and you know, we share just, you know, when you look at the history of that in the United States and other places, that the other side of it is whatever the demand was, the preeminent demand, right? That there's activity on that. And then the ancillary things, other things that are connected to that demand, is the long-term systemic change that's connected to that demand. The the policy work, the figuring out who's actually going to own or see the accountability of some sort of changes to, the way things function and whom holds what, whatever that may be. All that stuff starts happening or is happening, simultaneously with parties maybe involved with organizing the various demonstrations, and also parties who may be in league or already been engaged on these issues, being able to say, look, we was telling you, we were saying before that this was an issue, right? And you said it wasn't. Well, clearly it's an issue, right? And then we tried to temper it with, that doesn't necessarily mean that some of the things that will come out of that will be the things that ameliorate or end that practice or issue or whatever dynamic in full. But this is the human thing.
Yes,
that happens, right? And it's similar to, and I'm not remember for sure if I said it last week in this episode, that both the responses or the outcomes from participating in either both sets of actions, and activity, what have you, can possibly be a situation where you're not 100% satisfied with where the conversation stopped, but that a part of it is pushing on the energy, that when people are open, like their mind is open to the prospect of something different. So now you have to push to make like other things cement in or become a part of what we're going to agree, at least to move forward doing, to, in one sense, get me to go home, so to speak, and on another sense to get to feel that we can maybe move on to other topics of discussion or other areas of focus for those that are maybe engaged in other parts of these matters. And that was real Raji clinical way to talk about this, and I bear witness to that, to anyone that's listening. The other thing is that for those of us that have that keep track, we know, as I had to explain on the call the other day, we at week 2. This is an 18-month situation, 2-year situation about that.
Right.
Like,
yes, sir.
Don't use all your energy up right now.
don't burn out, right? Because I think the challenge is, you've noticed the and I want to be sure to temper my words because I'm not speaking as a representative of the city right now. I want to try to parse that out to the degree that someone cares about that. Mm-hmm. But the other sides and people who are going to fight these things are remarkably quiet.
Yeah.
And they're not quiet because they're going to let it go. They're quiet because they're watching the landscape.
Yeah.
They're watching who's aligning with what, right? And I think that becomes a really important component of this conversation. And then also, it kind of talks about some things we talked about last week, like, okay, there's some popular terms out here to do, and they're really good catchphrases, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the question starts to be, how much of it do you do? Which ones give you the biggest bang for your buck, right? Which ones are proportional to, okay, you demilitarize, I'm going to use that one. Mm-hmm. Do you bring in a third-party public safety person that's not with the police or not with the community to identify, what are safe levels of, the public safety still being able to respond to unforeseen issues? Mm-hmm. And what degree is that, right? Is it give away half of the, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle suits? Is it three-quarters of the suits, right? So, right now is where the ideas and broad are being engaged. I think the question is going to be, what do the conversations look like when you have to drill down to maximum impact? And then to your point, who's going to still be at the table?
Yeah.
Right. When outside is open and you got to go to a meeting at 2:45 with lawyers from all sides. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's going to be, and then again, the key is how do you get to the things that people actually feel, especially the people who you're saying you don't want it to occur. And right now, since everyone is speaking like this, I'm going to use this language. What are you going to do to center it so it makes Black people's lives easier and better?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how can a Black person? And is that demilitarization? Is that defunding in total? What is that? What minimizes the possibility of interaction between a George Floyd going forward and a particular officer?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
What does that? And is that the thing that we should be doing immediately to do that? Or is the demilitarization, which generally speaking, those things come out once a year, maybe? Maybe. Right. I mean, I'm not saying, I'm not making a judgment if people think those should be there or not, but I'm making a statement that they're kind of like your grandmother's fruitcake. You know what I mean? Like, they don't happen often.
Right. It's going to come every once in a while, but
right. Yeah. Is that what you're focusing on? So,
yeah. Well, I was processing and thinking about this, and we have some notes, so I'm gonna try to pull us so that because I think right now we're in that kind of this conversation that like at the moment of a civil protest, right? The conversation is very either or, right? It's very like, we ain't going in the crib till you do this, right? It's in and that is not a negative judgment of that being the rhetorical practice.
Right.
That's what you're supposed to do. That's why you're outside. Like, if you were outside and we ain't going home till we deliberate in fine detail about the nuances of the policy that we're going, like, that's not what, because when people are moved to vote with their feet and say, from a threat level assessment, I know it's a global pandemic, doesn't matter. This is more important to me right now.
Right.
I know there are other matters and issues that impact the day-to-day experience of my life, but those things are not as important right now. I feel moved to go, and I need to be outside. I need to be visible. I need to be, there, with a sign, whatever have you, right? So that person and where they're at, that this equilibrium, as we would say, as I would say in the educational, framework, right? That's the what I was dwelling on today, right? That if you think about folks being moved to certain actions due to experiencing something that puts them in a disequilibrium with the way the world is working, their own place and space and how they're feeling. And then now they're like, I got to do something so I can get back to a place where I feel balanced. Right. So, it's either or there. And there are some things that are clearly either or things, and I think the ability to tell how accurate, or how close to the either or you are is improved the closer you are to the immediate point of the matter. So in Minneapolis, folks that are directly there, involved with the data, the back and forth with the offending entity, with the people closest to what happened, are the closest to being able to have that either or discussion and also be satisfied by the either or, right? The further you get away from it, the either or you may, like, you are not actually in communication with, Minneapolis, Minnesota's, police apparatus and a related governmental structure. Now, you might elevate stuff that's happened or is happening in your community, i.e. Louisville, right? Breonna Taylor, and I want to elevate that sister's name. It's her birthday today at this time, but we're recording, or would have been her birthday, or it is, however the right way to say that. But she unfortunately, due to the actions and the choices of that authority, is not here. Those people, Louisville has an immediate relationship with that matter, right? And the rest of us, we have, depending on, where you orient yourself, how you feel, you may feel more engaged with that particular harm than the harm in Minneapolis, right? But either way, if you're not there, you're not, in those concentric rings of closeness to the matter, human cognition, the way we function, you're going to pull away a bit at some point, right? And then you're also going to be able to get into what's the both and? What's the other stuff that gets into, what should happen? It's the challenging thing I sit and not to even get into the brother Ahmad Arbery's case in that you have a related matter in that someone feeling they were taking legal operations, so they're making extra legal decisions, thought they were operating in the capacity of the police, took that man's life.
And I think all those three are unique in all the different ways this happens, whether it's vigilante behavior, police behavior. They're all symptoms of it, but to your point, they're different, and the resolutions that you're looking for are often different. And then the understanding of the policy that you're trying to get shifted long term sometimes is different depending on your state law as well. Mm-hmm. And it's a battle for those that endure it, right? Yeah. It's not a battle to the swiftest, right? And but you don't start if you don't start. So you want to give respect to those who are doing the work to bring it to bear. One of the challenges that I have, again, I'm speaking personally, is when we're talking about one thing and then we start talking about five things. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. When we're talking about a thing and the next thing you know, we're talking about a lot of stuff. And then it starts to be, okay, well, if we count it all up, everything went to everything. And I mean, and frankly, if you look at 68 and the things that happened after 68 in the things, I mean, you kicked in the Great Society, or it was already happening, but you kicked it more into gear, right? Well, I would say it was happening, but then it's like, okay, you have all these programs, right? And it's going everywhere. But who was controlling where it was going and what the result of it was supposed to be? And then when we go to look at it later, are we going to say, okay, what was the possible impact of those investments, and how was it connecting to breaking down the ecosystem of white supremacy and racism, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Because if it's not connected to the ecosystem of white supremacy and racism, whether it's through the lens of the carceral state, whether it's through the lens of engaging with kind of the criminal justice reform or police engagement reform, right? Then it'll be programs. Right? It'll be programs that seek to ameliorate the pain. Right. But right now, the question starts to be, and I think, there's always this tension of us asking this, is the goal to ameliorate the pain, to make someone forget that they're still sick? Or is it to do the work that might be more long-term and it might not make you feel better in the short term, but you're getting rid of the ecosystem, right? Mm-hmm. And I think, like you saw today, people are like, well, Michael Jordan's giving $100 million, right? So he's giving $10 million a year to, programs in the Black community and to bring justice for people. Well, that $10 million is a lot of money, but, all organizations need 25% overhead. Right?
Yeah. Especially a foundation style nonprofit, I'm assuming being created to administer those funds is definitely taking 25%.
Or let's just say this. Let's just say, okay, you're giving people money, and some of the money is going to salaries, some of the money is going to programming, right? Some of the money is, let's be real, some of the money is going to go to the ED's job too. If you get an infusion of cash from Michael Jordan and Jordan Brand, it ain't all hitting the street.
Yeah. And I should say, just because I want to add, when there is something like that, you do need somebody that knows what the hell they're doing to administer stuff. And it gets into a place that it makes us all real icky. Right? It makes everybody real icky. Because we're like, well, how much should you pay somebody that's going to manage $78 million worth of resources? And there's always somebody that's like, well, they should get paid the bare minimum for somebody in charge of that. It is like,
that's not true.
That's just not true.
Right. The skill to do that well,
Yeah.
Right? If you want it done well, if you want it done judiciously. And I don't want to go down the rabbit hole and watch the money.
Yeah.
However, it's just still to say that everyone's coming out. Like Uber sent me a message the other day that said they stand with black people. Right?
Word up, Uber.
So you're right. So
what the fuck does that mean? Like,
I don't know, man. Like, because my thing is, did you stand with us when hacks and jitneys and the kind of
you wouldn't let them on your platform because of their background.
Right, when you wouldn't let them on their platform
driving people for years.
Exactly. So and that's where an Uber, if y'all want to support the show,
add on. You know what I'm saying? You can holler at some of them people too.
Right. We still won't not say this, but like, how you going? Yeah, like you stand with black people, but the methodology that you used excluded black people.
Yeah,
it excluded them. But now you stand with us because it's the thing to say.
Yeah,
right?
Y'all had a meeting. You know what I mean? Somewhere in between, like Thursday last week and Monday afternoon. There was a conference call or email chain or a Zoom meetup or a hangout or something. And the whole company said, well, you look, guys, I think the tide is clear that we need to get on the other side of this issue. Like where we've, maybe played, I mean, even your man Raj,
right,
came out today like, maybe we should have listened to the players. Word, Raj. Word.
Right.
For real. You know what I mean? And then, because it all gets into this messy thing, and especially when the money got going, because it's almost like for certain people, and there's the, and this kind of bleeds into the media piece, but we'll just keep moving it around. Like when people hear that money went somewhere, right? For certain people, that signals to them that the matter is done because there's a pot of money someplace and it's going to do something in some existential or real fashion for someone who's upset, right? Whether I'm going to go look and see if anything actually happened that helped any of those people or that I had any intent of actually connecting with them and making a relationship, I'm going to stop being upset about it because some money went out. You know what I'm saying? Like it's all good now. And, the reality becomes this thing of, well, actually the story of what people needed, what people were asking for, all of that getting into the weeds and people who are skilled at then getting into the weeds and asking, what y'all do with that cheese? You know what I'm saying? Becomes a thing. It becomes a part of sort of the lore of how we talk about this, man. I mean, I've referenced maybe in this conversation, others in Hollywood Shuffle, fantastic cinema by the great Robert Townsend. And the brother talks about the revolution. And he said brothers was down, they was ready, you know what I'm saying, for the fight. And they all went downtown and they came back with government jobs, right? You know what I'm saying? As an encapsulation of the reality of one of the things that did happen in the 70s is the federal government became one of the places, especially if you got a degree or something, you could get that, like, basically they had the structure in place that was closest to something meritocratic that we had in this country in terms of, higher level paying jobs and access to opportunity, than what you would find in the corporate space at large, right? Because they had these hard, firm rules, and then because of the structure and they're easy to sue and all the other things that get into why once they put it on paper, it's like, yeah, if you had this kind of degree, even to this day, why it persists in federal work positions, they're very big on, do you have all the stuff? You got all the stuff we put in the job description, then you score high and, you should hopefully get in there. People, can get into how they feel about that, whether that's good or bad, but I'm just explaining as an answer to a problem that was a policy remedy. It was like, well, we're going to be real stringent about people having a certain background to do these professional roles. I also want to elevate the importance of people being skilled for professional roles. It's actually an important thing. It's one of the things that undermines us being able to implement the concessions that are given to a community. So someone says, all right, due to what we did, 40 years ago, we're going to put a pot of money in here. It's going to be $12 million. And we're going to trust, we're going to find somebody that the community trusts and a couple people maybe, and we're going to try to find a way to do something that makes things better for those people that were harmed. Short, to the degree that we're allowed to do that with public funds or whomever's funds, right? But when the deliverables get into play, And you don't have people that understand how this stuff works, and they're almost speaking two different languages. You end up with dissatisfaction. You also end up with less than what people hope was the outcome.
Right. Especially if, like I said, the way that they answering that question is, well, we ain't really talking about answering the criminal justice state or the carceral state or dealing with how police and community interact with each other, right? It's, we see black people, we value your lives, so here's some more money than we would have given you before because somebody died.
Right.
Which lends itself to, you see me when I'm in crisis.
Yeah.
Right? You respond to me when I'm in crisis. So I have to be in crisis for you to really respond.
Right. That's when I'm mad.
You don't see my humanity without me having a fit. And so again, there's this larger thing in America of like, it becomes a logic that I understand people rationally say, well, this is how you get change in America, right? And then whether I agree with what change looks like is something different. But it's for sure to say the fact that systems, again, let's go back to Uber.
Mm-hmm.
It was okay to not have the jitneys and the hacks and the gypsy cabs, depending on where you're at in the country, not allow them on because of their background, which doesn't mean that they are not safe, or any more than it meant that folks who didn't have something on their jacket were safe, especially if you understand and agree that the criminal justice system
is disproportionate.
It's disproportionate, right? Mm-hmm. So if you understand the disproportionate impacts, you understand that some of the people, a particular population of the people who have been impacted by that system, are not people who will bring danger to your drivers. In the converse is true, that there's some people who are monsters. They just haven't done anything illegal yet.
Right. Never been caught. They've never been adequately policed.
Yes, they've never been adequately policed to be identified as a monster.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so that is the example of when virtue signaling starts to become dangerous. Because then you start to lose the path forward about understanding how these systems interact and what the goal of this infusion of cash or the goal of the infusion of support is, especially when, going back to last week, there's not necessarily large scale organizations who are framing for people.
Mm-hmm.
This is what is helpful in breaking down the ecosystem and the relationship between needing a lot of cops, the demonization and criminalization of black and brown people, the criminalization of immigrants, the criminalization of the homeless, right? These are all directly related things to how many cops, how many police you think you need. Right? Because if you didn't have all those frameworks of criminalization, you wouldn't need a lot of people.
Right.
And so if you don't read that right, then you're going to have a challenge, right? And so that's my, that's what I'm going to call my Fred Sanford fear, which is my old black man fear. We've seen this show before and we've seen how this show goes.
Right. And that even some of these things that we think are going to help are going to end up making it worse for me later. Like,
exactly.
It's gonna be like, oh yeah, do that. You know what I'm saying? And I for those, I did a little digging, and there's a couple notes, particularly around, there's a couple articles around like what is the real conversation around like defunding the police and like what are some of the because my thing is, in moments like this, I want people to resist the urge, to kind of go into like, well, common sense. And make the off cliche comment around common sense. Well, common, and you just look at it and think like this, and then you get to the answer. It's like, well, if it was always that damn easy, we would have been did it. It's obviously not that easy. There's an inertia of human behavior and human function and the way we exist that inhibits some things from changing quickly. And the kind of the rhetorical practice of acting as if folks are actually willfully trying to avoid something that is that simple and not acknowledging, like, actually, these people are having the problem changing the behavior because the other things that are attached to the behavior change are not palatable to them. At some point, they affect where other people go, well, I ain't willing to give up that, and that, so I'm not changing this.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I wanted to touch on, because we had, a note we had down was around, because there were several, I want to say basically there were some efforts to mobilize ideas this week that I think, did not land where anyone wanted them to land. And from the Blackout Tuesday to even just the the ability of our, and I don't, as a person, I'll let everyone know, I have not watched the nightly news of any local channel, any national news network, of any kind, in any steady frequency for the majority of the last 20 years. And I remain well informed. And I say that to say, the ability for this conversation to be framed back into the riot, or peaceful or not peaceful, and the destroying it, like that, that seemed to still become a wrestling match, in the public space to a degree. Something that we talked about in our debrief or what have you was sort of like mass mobilization versus mass education.
Yes.
Could you give me like a thought on that?
Yeah. And so just really quickly about that is we are doing a good job mobilizing people to an issue that we may or may not be doing a good job educating people about the issue. And then again, going forward, more touching on educating them to what they should be expecting to see as a result of their mobilization. So again, what does success look like? Right? If Minnesota doesn't do chokeholds anymore, let's take one. Minneapolis doesn't do chokeholds anymore. Okay. So let's assume they don't do chokeholds anymore. Does that mean there's not some other methodology that they will use to do something like a chokehold?
Right.
Or will they tase people more?
Right.
Will that be part of the collective bargaining agreement? Like, what else are we talking about? Because systems have a very unique way of evolving to the landscape. It's kind of like, I'll give an example, just a quick one. It's kind of like there was a time where everyone stood outside and sold drugs, right? Mm-hmm. And that was what they did. You stole outside, you sold drugs, right? And then it came a situation where no one stands outside and sells drugs anymore. So the need for people to live in the gray market, or the quote unquote black market, has not changed. Only it evolved to the system that was happening around criminal justice, right? So my point is, in the same way, we have to understand systems will evolve. Mm-hmm. To, if you get rid of one thing, here's another thing that comes in. So the mass mobilization around the pain and the anguish of Black people who are interacting with the police and asking for this thing, the question starts to be, how do we keep everyone educated to keep everyone on point, or keep everyone accountable to what that change looks like? Mm-hmm. And when you have mass mobilization without mass education, what you get is Blackout Tuesday. Right? You get Blackout Tuesday where it was like, let's do it now, when it was like, no, let's do it in July. And then you're doing it now to show your support for Black people, versus that was a musician space for them to talk about what Blackout Tuesday meant. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because now you're mass mobilizing people without necessarily truly educating them, again, because going back to virtue signaling.
Right. I'm just going to give a quick rundown for the listeners of that evening, right? Because I'm on my social media tool, and I'm not posting a lot because I'm trying to get some other things together and trying to do some editing, and so I'm just trying to monitor and see what's out there, right? And I started seeing these black squares. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. There's another one. I was like, oh, there must be a thing going on. Let me figure out if I can find out what the thing is, right? Because I didn't get anything. I didn't get a thing from nobody. I didn't get like a direct message. I didn't get an email. I didn't get a something that would pierce through the cloud, so to speak, to make sure I knew what to do. right? Which is a thing of practice and operation. Some people are like, oh, well, if you just put it out on the Twitter, everyone will find it. Or if you just put it out on whoever's, this celebrity says it, everyone will find out. And it's like, not necessarily. And the way all these algorithms work, they're not linear time based anymore. So they aggregate and then give you stuff kind of based on, the relationship between other stuff that you've looked at and this and that, and then the hashtags. And so, it's this whole, mathematically derivable process around what ends up popping up for you, right? So then I go, okay, so I went and found a couple things like, okay, so this was the idea was this, was spurred on my understanding from folks Black people who worked in the entertainment industry, trying to tell to their industry, execs, you need to do something that reflects how we are experiencing this moment, right? And it's like, all right, that's a noble situation. So, but as things happen with people, is you start off with a noble idea, and you can start to lose what's going to happen based on how you roll it out, how you decide to do it. It's sort of like, you wanted to take, the person that you find romantically exciting in your life out for a nice meal in the COVID summer, and you didn't really plan out which park, and you realize you want to go to a park where everyone else is trying to go to that same park and be romantic and have a picnic, and and then like the whole thing goes bad, right? And you go, oh, I realize this is not going to work, right? Because you didn't plan out the implementation of the outcome, or somewhere a step was missed. So you get this. So then but then the wildest thing was the mix of reactions, right? So you get, first I go find out what it is, and while I'm deliberating, do I want to participate? Because it sounded like to me, it was sort of like, okay, well, Black people, do you, not Black people, do these other steps. Black people do what you feel makes the most sense for you as a Black person in this moment, right? Other people in support of Black people, clear the airwaves, so to speak, of your, mishwash, wobble, and whatever the hell you be talking about. You know what I'm saying? And do this other thing. And, when, I started saying the performative morality and the performative, protest thing, and people sort of criticizing people protesting that way as maybe not being sufficient. Where, me, I can pick apart a whole lot of people's protest activity if y'all really want to hear it. You probably don't, so I'll keep it to myself right now. You know what I'm saying? But I'll let you know if you, however virtuous you may feel you are around your intents, there's a pretty good chance that I can put a little challenge, a little doubt into your mind about those activities. However, we all are very comfortable with anything within the social media space being very judgmental of its lack of value, right? But the concept that you got to understand within the social media space is the relative impact of the individual as a media engagement point. Because the thing I think we have not accounted for in our engagement of social media and of media in general is that basically there are people, whether they earned it or not, have more weight because they can reach more people, right? And their information will pick up and jump up in more people's thing, right? So a celebrity with 2 million, with 30 million followers is going to pop up. Whatever they said about something is going to pop up in more people's stuff. While author who may be, fantastically developed in their conversation and deep understanding of the subject matter, who only has 4,000 followers in whatever platform, no matter what they're saying, it's going to have less impact because less people are going to see it immediately until other people, move it around. Right now, that is we have a comfort in criticizing like the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox News, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the LA Times, Washington Times. I'm sure somebody give me another conservative one. Whatever you consider Breitbart and the Epoch News to be. Yeah. And by the way, fuck you. Take that one. You name the publication or the vehicle. If we see them as more a part of the structure or they exist in this other way, like we hold them to a different standard, and we don't think of a social media entity that might have a similar or high level of ability to impact how an idea is consumed, how an idea is thought about, how an idea is experienced. We'll just go, oh, well, it is a performative bibbidi-bobbidi-boo, and we'll make a high-minded critique of what it does. But the reality is similar to, you might not like foreshadowing a conversation is coming. You may not like what rock and roll is saying, but the kids like to rock and roll. kids like to rock and roll. They want to see more of the rock and roll. And regardless if you like the rock and roll, the kids like the rock and roll. So you're going to have to make it.
It's provocative. It gets people going, man.
Get some movement. You know what I'm saying? You're going to have to make a decision about, all right, we're going to have to embrace, at some point, the same way people vote with their feet in their presence in the streets, people vote with their feet in their what they decide to use, what they decide to be their North Stars and their bearing points and their triangulation, landmarks to find out what's real and what's not real. And unfortunately, for those who would like it to be a different way, we don't, no matter how learned you are on the subject matter, you don't have control about which points people, develop trust and concern with. So all that to say, when this thing rolls out, without someone having the sense of how to implement it to ensure that the right message preceded the activity, caused it not to work. It's plain and simple. Because it's a right route, and then people were like, see, they're trying to hide what the army is doing from you. And which, how I feel about people giving too much credit to the machine to pre-think. Because my experience is the machine is not as smart as we think it is. You know what I mean? But so with that, I would say, what from a mass education perspective, what are some points, what are some things that you think we could do to improve how these things happen?
Well, I think it's acknowledging and projecting the message in a manner that you can't share it without sharing all of it. It's kind of like the Campaign Zero, I think, has done a great job around the 8 at 8 or the, all for 8 model of like, here's the 8 things you can do and here's a graphic of them. So you can't confuse it.
Right.
It's not just virtue signaling. It's saying, fight for these 8 things. Yeah. And here's what the 8 things are. Don't shoot at a moving vehicle. Don't choke someone. Don't do this. Like, you have to frame it. You can't leave it so broad that you allow people to butcher the message. I mean, we're always going to play telephone.
Yeah.
However, there's information you can convey in a visual way that does not allow people to play telephone, or it minimizes the impact of the telephone game. Mm-hmm. And I think the blackout one, and again, because of many of the messages, the benefit of the messages are they're so broad that that anyone can pick it up. Like the idea of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
It's so basic and simplistic and so of course someone's Black Lives Matter, right? Mm-hmm. Now that's different than saying Black Lives Matter, so don't choke Black men in confrontations. Right? Yeah. Black Lives Matter, so don't shoot at cars when they're driving. Right. Black Lives Matter, so de-escalate force like this, right? Mm-hmm. That's bringing more to it, right? But that's complicated. But so you can't just have the blackout and then the idea like, okay, you're stopping the communication because you're putting because you're operating with a algorithm that you don't control.
Right.
Like you're all doing this individually, not necessarily you have paid accounts. So you're structuring when you share what and when it drops.
Yeah. Right.
These are individual accounts. They just go into an algorithm of a whole bunch of black squares, which then again is the most like unclear yet clear thing. Like it's blackness. It's, you know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, I wonder even how knowledge everlasting, like, when he did his name, people like, it was just like, it's blackness and it had all this depth to it.
Right.
But people didn't know what it meant.
Indeed.
So you're just looking at it. So in the same way, you're just looking at these black squares, and does that mean that you ain't taking it no more? Does that mean you blacked out? You know what I'm saying? Does that mean you've gone numb? Like, I don't know what all these squares mean.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so when mass mobilization comes before education, then you get people having to pull it back. You have people spending half the day educating other people on the problem. Mm-hmm. Which is also a challenge because then you got half of a day of people saying don't use that, and if you use that, you're helping the man.
Right, which is immediately where some people went. They went straight to you helping the man hide what they doing. Now I, Justice Raji, reader of the Book of Five Rings, Sun Tzu, a little bit Shaka Zulu, but this, little that. I've
Right.
studied some things around human conflict and challenge, and I go, if those who are taking the wheel on organizing, the civil walkout, presence, are depending on, if they're depending on the algorithm to always function a certain way, maybe not the best decision. Now, if they're, as I like to say, within margins, expecting and accounting for certain activity from the algorithms, for specific outcomes, but having contingencies for the places where it will fail them, thumbs up from Raji. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's interesting to juxtapose like how like I had to tell myself the other night, I was like, you know what? The reason you get upset with some of these things people say on any of these vehicles is that you're jumping in to their stream of conscious statements, not really being sure what the hell they're talking about. Right? Or what they said before, how they feel deep, in other places. You might be able to fill in the gaps if you know the person personally, or you've been engaging with them for a long time, right? So you kind of know where they sit, or at least feel comfortable with where you think they sit. And that would, therefore, if they make a comment about something in a critiquing mode, you can go, yeah, I think I know where that person's coming from with what they're saying, right? Versus some random that's like, defund, ice cream sandwiches because they are undermining our dietary health. And, you're like, I don't really know where that came from. I'm totally confused. Where we talking about ice cream sandwiches? Or you might jump to this other, like, very judgmental response. And if you're not a person that goes to judgmental responses, when other people go to immediately to judgmental responses, you just get annoyed by them by doing that. Because you're like, why? You don't even, did I miss something? And I just realized it's like that's all stuff where you just have to tap out.
Yes.
And go, you know what? I'm just not going to actually give any comment to what happened, right? Which I think is a skill that you learn that you have to do to all kinds of different inputs in this day and time.
No, and I think to your point, yeah, you have to be very thoughtful around what you receive, because you don't know the person's intent when they sent it to you. Mm-hmm. It's like we have all these messages that are like, what exactly were you trying to say? I know what you sent me, but I don't know why you sent it to me. I don't know what the point of it was. Yeah. And I don't know if it was helpful or not. Right? Like, at what point was it helpful to keep showing neighborhoods that were burning and keep showing fires? Because I know who that's helpful to. When you keep showing fires, that's helpful to those who lit the fire.
Right.
Right? When you keep showing folks in military and stuff, it's helpful to those who want that to be a problem. So when you do something, it's not neutral, right? And especially media. Media is not neutral.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so us figuring out how to take in information, what this information means, how it's used, is going to be really important going forward, because we're going to receive so much. It's very similar to how they shared that he had like coronary disease, and then he had coronavirus in his system, right? So basically you were sharing again how the health of Black people is one of the reasons that he died, versus the reason him having the health disease and the reason he was choked are part of the same systems.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like all of these maladies,
the health
hitting him are actually products of the different streams of how what's around him affects him. And we're not going to talk about
exactly.
that. We're going to talk about, well, he has it, or he had it, it existed. You know what I'm saying? And the context of where it came from has no bearing, which is a very, our current time to do.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man. So I don't want to, for the record, like, we bear witness that, by the middle of this week, charges came down. The charges were adjusted, I think, to make the potential outcomes more likely to get where people will be pleased, quite frankly, in terms of the second degree with the third degree and the manslaughter piece and the other, like, all of that, whether or not, again, this would be a palatable, because folks, again, if you out there and you feel absolutely compelled to be outside right now, you do not see the detailed, nuanced realities of charging structures as something that satisfies your thirst. You know what I'm saying? You like, I want justice. You mean like as in me? You know what I'm saying? And I understand that. I also understand that these are the rules by which this society will make decisions about, who pays the price. And they, I can't say that in full, when you get an understanding how our legal system works and the rules, that it is, I'm not saying that it's perfect, but also I'm saying I don't think it's without its merits in the ideas that operate in it. And I want to dive into something with you, God. I didn't prepare you for this, but it's something I was thinking about because it's a rhetorical act that folks keep saying, right? And it's this, a system designed to be this way is always going to do this thing and wobbly wobbly woo, right? And I know why people say it, and for anyone listening, I understand why people say it, but I need you to ride with me because this is how I look and process the world, especially within the confines of our value system and our structures that we use to make and process reality, right? There's a power to the present and to those who we see as the framers of the present by asserting that design, right? Because the design piece, like someone designs a logo for you, right? The logo is a finite thing, right? They give you 3 different colors. Maybe there's a version for the web, a version for print, a version for your media, social media spaces, versions for the little icon in the browser window, right? But ultimately, it's static until you change it again, right? Design in that context, meaning that the object fully acts out the agreed upon realized vision that came between the designer and the person that received the design, right? So we assign this word design, the system, to a system. Now, when you start to understand systems, that, systems being the result of the interaction of multiple forces interacting, trying to get to an equilibrium, into a balance that allows the system to persist, I'm discomforted by the level to which folks can feel confident. Like, it's almost like, so are you telling me that in the Federalist Papers, they knew that eventually they would want to, be brutal with Black people in that very specific way post-slavery? So therefore, like, I'm saying, like, we designed it, right? It's like, well, I'm pretty sure that, I'm saying, like, I respect and understand definitely where you make the threads, right? And you see, like, this precedes this and then leads to this, right? And then within real-time conditions, these other choices get made. Whoa. And then people forget why certain things were fears. We forget that, part of the super militarism, militarization of the police force is actually the result of, housing desegregation and, other things to basically make, breed in and root in, whether, very willfully or over time in response to, trying to find a way to get people to, those who wanted more clarity of mind, so to speak, or I would say people who did not want to be by Black and brown people and wanted to find a way to make them uncomfortable. Then saying, yeah, these are the ways that you should police their space, because you're not actually protecting them from themselves where they're at. You're hoping you're protecting them from coming where you're at. Right. Right. But that stuff happening, is always in tune with the times. It's not just a, I understand the intent, but I worry that folks' capacity to see how to change it or undo it or make something else becomes this, like, where you're basically you're remapping the idea that they thought of all the ways to hurt and kill us the whole time, and there's no way we can escape it. And I bristle. I can't do it.
Well, it's the if I may use the term, it's the fuck Thurgood Marshall theory,
right?
meaning all these Black men and women who became lawyers and advocates who understood how to use law, right? So, like you're saying, the American legal system is stacked against you versus the people who have been in control of the American legal system,
right,
have framed some of the parameters to produce these results versus the thing in itself. It's kind of like it's a bike. You could throw it in the window, or you can you ride it you can ride it to go get food. It's up to you. Now, if someone's been using a bike for so long, you begin to look at the bike and you don't separate the utility of the bike from the user of the bike. To your point, people don't separate the utility of the bike versus the user. Yeah. Here is where the challenge comes in, is your relationship to the utility of the bike is so connected to the user that you never think a bike can be used for anything but throwing it through a window, even though it also can be used to have fun and take a 50-mile ride, to become healthy, right? And so that becomes our challenge, and that is the power challenge.
Yeah.
And that is, one of the things that I personally struggle with when people understand power versus equity. And, what does power look like to leverage the institutions or the utility to produce a result differently than the current user is doing. Because there was a point where people weren't using the bike in a certain way, and then they started to use it in that way, and then they created a lot of lawyers to use it that way, right? They created a lot of institutions to make sure that the institution had this way. They created lawmakers. They paid for lawmakers who saw the world their way. They created institutions to reaffirm and create fraternal organizations to make people see it that way.
They spend time every day.
They spend time, effort, and money every day to advance a thing through the whatever means it is needed. So it could be media. It could be, if anyone ever just wants to take a look at the Heritage Foundation, and like the last 50 years, conservatives realized that they just needed to flood the American judicial system.
Yeah.
That's how they were going to get it. If you look, why are some of the most religious people in the world somewhat okay with our current president standing and stuff that he does? Because they have flooded the federal legal system with conservative lawyers. Flooded. That's Mitch McConnell's number one thing. I just want judges. So when you run into a bad judge, you run into a judge that has a view on the world. Just like you can have a judge that has another view on the world. They can both get law degrees. Right?
Yep.
Like if you got a DA that's pro, law and order, and then you get a Krasner in Philly, they both are DAs. They both are lawyers. They just have a different view on the law.
Right.
It's the utility can be separate from the user. And I think that is the biggest challenge that we have, is how do you get people who have been purposefully isolated from making this distinction? They've been purposely isolated from thinking about this challenge, right? To actually start to have the conversation of what this challenge means and looks like in a way that is a 10 to 20 year slog of victory. Right? The conservative folks created these think tanks way before. They created the Benevolent Police Officers Associations and these things way to be powerful. When we're talking about individual activity and following people, and then we're too good to follow people, we don't want to give money to the NAACP because we don't know what they're doing, and we don't want to give money to the Urban League because we don't know what they're doing, and you don't want to give money to your church or your masjid because you don't know what they're doing. Other folks are giving money and finding wealthy people to fund think tanks that now have just become the norm of a certain amount of American thought.
Yep. And they spend time and energy to get those ideas in play, right? And I think it's an important thing, and I think that I think people nibble around it in the way real specific way I think I see it show up with black men is a certain level of sort of like iconoclast thinking as it pertains to like the herd, so to speak, of Black people. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, it often it shows up in the form of like, our balance between social conservative, internal values versus more liberally, more liberal public policy concepts, right? That you can siphon. Sometimes you can siphon some, not just Black men, but some more Black men than not Black men, kind of over to the side a little bit by also appealing to this reality of like, how I processed and looked at the other implications of this particular thing that we're asking for, or that when we're, when we talk about how are you personally accountable for what happens to you, right? And then if we are providing you with safety net resources, but you're not doing good with the safety net resources, then maybe you don't deserve it. Like, yeah, I mean, those kind of things, where you can find this other identity, and they kind of sometimes they siphon you off, but sometimes it just becomes this conflict where, you just exist, in a space where you accept something because you know what its value is to those that need it, even if you have maybe a certain level of discomfort or disdain, depending on the day of the week, about that thing. But
Right.
then the other side of like, you also we related to power is the comfort with having a think tank operation that like folks like no, we study these things and looking at them, these are our values, and here's how we see that they could be articulated in different areas of public existence, public policy. And we don't always have comfort. We just don't like being very assertive with that in ways that frankly I think we need.
Right.
So, but we end up sometimes doing it within, even within the realities of mass mobilization, right? We're very comfortable articulating the concepts of getting out in the street when one is dissatisfied, right? Because we feel, for whatever reason, I would say, in my estimation, speaking for myself, that we feel that we can stand on firm ground on being, strident about those concepts, where just other concepts we don't feel so secure, or because we know the fragility of sort of our ability to control the outcome with some of those things, we're less comfortable being like, this is my platform to each other, because at some point I know I'm going to disappoint some of us because we actually may not have consistent ability to act on these ideas, if that's from collective ownership concepts to individual ownership concepts to
Right.
certain concepts around educational practice and experience, where it's like, I, as a person that looks at this and says that this is a good idea, and I may have this training and the skill and the study base where I can assert that this is a good thing, but the implementation and the reality that people are going to experience are not going to match what I'm going to tell them. So they're going to be like, they're going to think I'm full of shit, even though I'm not full of shit.
Right.
It's just, unfortunately, we can't act on it.
No, I mean, no, I think you're right. So I think it's really, again, that's where that education comes in, that organization. And I know we have broadly decentralized models, right? But I think the key is, even in those decentralized models, how do you find a way where you can still have some, if I'll use the term, quality control, especially when you're trying to fight for the same things in all the places in America. Because if it's like, you don't want one city to be okay and another city not to be okay, because every Black person can't move from the city that is not okay to the city that is okay.
Right.
So if you want to make it so that it's okay, that means you have to foster it and structure it so that you're advancing the same things in the same government, in the same state governments all across the country, or everywhere where you see a big population of Black folks, brown folks, newcomer community, LGBT, folks without addresses, right? All the folks who can be negatively impacted when systems are not responsive to the needs of everyone. So, again, we'll be talking about this. I mean, this has been, I would argue, one of the biggest outcries in 50 years.
Yeah.
So you kind of get a global pandemic, which is once in damn near 100 years, and then you get the biggest thing in 50 years happening literally in the same 6 months.
Yeah.
Right. So you just get a big shift, and again, like how, again, going back to this, when this shifts, how does everyone shift with it? How will we shift when, this is my personal perspective, not my professional perspective. We need to be giving money to think about when people start getting evicted, when landlords can start evicting people.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is like winter is coming. To use a Game of Thrones reference.
Yes, sir.
It's coming.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right. Like that's coming. So we're one level everyone's giving money to programs. It's like, no, you better be trying to make sure people can stay in their house in the next 3 to 6 months because they owe 3 months rent. And the system is going to be so inundated that I bet you systems are going to respond and start expediting if we're not careful and if we're not human centered. So, listen, man, I think, we talk about a lot of things. We talk about heavy stuff, but I just want to thank you for keeping this kind of platform for Black men to have these conversations that are obviously not all just about Black men. I think one of the problems sometimes is we get Black men kind of platforms that are just like replays of the barbershop.
Yeah.
Right.
In the most unhealthy way.
Right. They're like just replays of the barbershop. I mean, it is, in my own personal perspective, the barbershop is a barbershop for a reason, and that's why there's no TV on. Like, there's no video. Like,
right, put your camera away, put your phone down, man.
Yeah, put your phone down. Right, it's like very similar to for Black women. Okay, the kitchen table or the living room conversation that Black women are having, and nobody put that on TV.
Right, keep that on.
Right,
let them have that.
Keep that. People need safe space.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right? Everybody needs safe space. Everyone needs a space to call their own, mental, physical, and emotional space to call their own. You know what I mean? So I want to thank you for finding all different kind of ways to talk to Black men around broad universal issues that are advancing things and not just a replay of like Bernie Mac and, the kings of comedy.
Sure.
We're getting Black men together.
Indeed. And I think, we at that spot. So I'll make this my closing statement. And one, thank you. And we've been rocking hard every week for going on like 12 weeks, something like that. I don't know, it feels like longer. I thank you for riding and joining me in this conversation. I don't think we could have this space, without each other and without you. With me simply could not have this without you. And I want to say that out loud so the world can hear it. And that I appreciate you for adding on with me. And I think, we're going to hold this, as I say, we're going to hold this corner, for this to happen, right? For the things that can be generated for people to hear these perspectives. And also, speaking to the matters that are happening and the detail of the matters that are happening in the different parts of the country. We are here to talk and process and share how we, people at a distance, brothers at a distance, brothers that are empathetic, of what's happening there, brothers that are, quite frankly, fine connoisseurs of the collective Black experience, that love Black people, love to be in these spaces. I have not had the good fortune to be in Louisville. I have been to Minneapolis. I've been to Atlanta very briefly. The guy's been in Atlanta much more than I. These places mean something to us. And my hope is that you, the listener, can pull something from us trying to make sense, right, of a world that we want to care about, but also we want to be respectful to those who are closest to it, right, that love it in a different way, right, and hopefully, share how we're trying to process this moment, how we're trying to understand these things, how we try to look at the world, how we experience the world. And when I say take the best part for ourselves, right, that we try to take something that we can move with and make it to the next moment that we have to engage it and be well, and not be stifled or stunted. And all, praise resources for any positive outcomes in those worlds and those spaces. Please give to those who are closest to the matter and are doing the most work. Let us be a rider to that.
Yeah. And so I just want to say this really quick because we didn't touch on this, and I think we'll have to do a deeper dive at another time. But it's important to think about how cities are like people. And sometimes trauma, you respond immediately. And sometimes it's with you for your whole life. And I don't think, and I just want to say this, I want to tread lightly on this because I know people have different perspectives. I know people assume that it's just a building, but when you include it just being a building on top of generational disinvestment, harming a building in the communities where you've already had generational disinvestment ain't just a building. It means more.
Yeah.
Because in many senses, there was not investment and you had to use all kind of federal incentives to get investment there for any way. And if someone is not equally as intentional, which means you got to have the right elected officials in who are intentional about making sure that it recovers and making sure there's continued investment, even in weak markets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. And weak is not about people. It's just about interest of them trying to spend more money. Right. That's all.
Indeed.
But I want to say that because when you talk about North Minneapolis and South Minneapolis, and people that have been there understand that there was purposeful investment because of generational disinvestment. The West End of Louisville, there's generational disinvestment that activists, community members, elected officials, city officials, philanthropy folks have been thoughtful around. But it don't just happen. Buildings are expensive. And so I just want to say that, I don't want people to assume that buildings aren't expensive. And just like you have human needs, the brick and mortar need that someone could feel like someone has built something for me, that's not cheap. And I think we should just be thoughtful around that for the benefit of all of our community. Because sometimes when you're acting on behalf of a community, that means you have a responsibility to act on behalf of the entire community. So, that I say peace.
Thank you for listening to Good Brothers. Much love and appreciation to my good brother Majestic for joining me once again so we could bring this part of our lives to you. Thank you to all the folks, all the people out in the streets and in the cities demonstrating, organizing, thinking, studying, engaging to try to change this thing, change this world. Thank you to you for listening and being a part of this little slice of life where we're trying to deal with this in the way we can and share and move our thoughts forward. I want to thank my Patreon contributors, my Patreon supporters for adding on to the foundation. That's Molly, Sarah, two new members for coming in and contributing to this work and allowing me to have to make the space and the time to keep creating and keep sharing these stories and these thoughts. You can find Ask Your Oldhead anywhere Ask Your Oldhead is found. If you search it on the internet or anywhere podcasts are located. Again, you can become a patron by searching for Ask Your Oldhead on Patreon. We got 3 support levels. Find one that works for you. And every dime, I'm not going to be on a batch. It goes to making sure I could pay the cost to keep this going and to keep this as a part of my constellation of activity. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, all of the various platforms at Justice Raji. That's JUSTICERAJEE. Also, if you just search Ask Your Oldhead, it's bound to pop up. More to come. I suppose at some point we will find a way to talk on the Facebook group, but one exists, so find us there, man. Maybe you can get us sparked up, give us some feedback on this conversation. In any event, man, everyone out there, be safe. Be strong. And I want to close with just giving a special acknowledgement to the life of Breonna Taylor, Today would be her 27th birthday. I'm recording and releasing this right now, and I wanted the closing thought to be, centering her at this moment and everybody that's fighting in Louisville, to see some results and some change in her name and in her honor. Peace.